No radars swept the skies. No radio signals were being broadcast. Yet down in the combat information centers aboard every ship, the sailors sat and listened for electronic signals from Soviet ships and planes. Russian planes were aloft this afternoon over the North Atlantic, searching for the United States. They had been searching for 3 days now and still hadn't found her out here in these millions of square miles of ocean. The Americans were making the search as difficult as possible. The United States had been sailing east under a thick frontal system for 5 days, hidden from the cameras of reconnaissance satellites ever since she left Chesapeake Bay. Laden with moisture, the extensive cloud system covered a lot of ocean. The task group dashed from squall to squall. The rain would help mask the ship's radar signature from Soviet satellites. The exit into the North Atlantic had been aided by 2 nuclear-powered attack submarines. They had sailed from Norfolk the day before the carrier and located the Soviet snooper submarine that routinely lurked at the mouth of the bay. The American boats dashed back and forth at high speed to screen the noise of the departing task group, which slipped away to the southeast while the Russian vainly tried to sort out the screw noises of the warships from the cacophony made by the American subs and the dozen or so merchantmen entering and leaving the bay. Part of the problem for the Soviets was that the American task group was not now where it should be, on the main sea lane from the Chesapeake to the Strait of Gibraltar. It was almost 250 miles south of it. So the Russians were still searching the huge empty ocean, looking for a silent needle that moved erratically and relentlessly. At present, the nearest Soviet ship was a trawler outfitted with an array of sensitive antennas 200 miles to the northeast. The trawler's crew would tattle to long-range naval bombers if they heard anything. The search and evasion were games, of course, for the Soviets and the Americans. Each side was training its combat crews. Each side was letting the other see its capability. Each side sought to intimidate the other in order to prevent the final war that the citizens of neither country wanted. In the cockpit of his F-14 Tomcat, Jake Grafton listened to the electronic countermeasures equipment, the ECM. This gear could detect the transmissions of Soviet radars while the fighter was still so far away from the emitting radar that the signal would not return in a usable form. In other words, while the F-14 was still out of detection range. This afternoon, Jake listened in vain. No radars yet. He watched the altimeter record their progress upward and occasionally checked his wingman visually. The 2 planes emerged from the clouds at 20,000 feet into clear air. To the west, the sun was still 20 degrees above the horizon, but it was blurred and indistinct above a thin cirrus layer at about 40,000 feet. The light here was soft, diffused, and the visibility excellent. Jake leveled the flight at 30,000 feet at 0.8 Mach, 300 knots indicated. "Okay, CAG," Toad said over the intercom, the ICS. "I'm receiving the E2's data link. Our targets are about 180 miles away, bearing 020. Jake came right to that heading and adjusted the brightness and gain on the horizontal situation display on the instrument panel in front of his knees. On this scope, he could see a copy of the picture the RIO had on the tactical information display in the rear cockpit. Sure enough, there was the threat display. Even though the American fighters and ships were not emitting, they could see the Russians. The United States was keeping an E-2 Hawkeye radar plane airborne around the clock. This twin-engine turboprop had waited until it was over 100 miles from the ship before it turned on its radar, and then it data-linked everything it saw back to the ships and to any fighters aloft. The Hawkeye was an eye in the sky. It had located 2 Tupolev Tu-142 Bear bombers approaching from the north, still scanning the sea with their radars, searching. And aboard the United States, Jake, as the air wing commander, had decided to intercept the Bears. Now the ECM warning light on the right window frame directly in front of Jake began to flash. "We're receiving radar signals from Ivan," Toad said. The main ECM panel was in his cockpit, since in combat the pilot would be too busy to check it. "I don't want these guys to know we're coming until we're on their tails," Jake told his RIO. "What's their heading?" "They're going 280 at about 400 knots, sir. You may want to come right another 20 degrees. Then when we pass behind their port beam,